They say dogs can sense what humans can't. But no one believed what Thor did that night. Not even Officer Daniels, the man who owed him his life. Thor had been retired for nearly 3 years. Once, he was a decorated K9 rescue dog, praised, photographed, and feared by criminals. But ever since that last mission left him limping and scarred, he was just quiet. He slept most days, watched the world go by from Daniel's porch. But that night was different. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and tell us where you're tuning in from. The sky cracked open with thunder. Rain came down in sheets. Daniels was about to sip his coffee when Thor shot up, ears up, tail stiff, body locked. Then he let out a bark so loud, it made Daniels jump. "What is it, boy?" Daniels asked, walking over. Thor didn't wait. He ran to the door, slammed his paw against it, barking non-stop. Daniels frowned. "We already fed you. You're not chasing a raccoon again." But Thor was desperate, scratching, growling, howling like the world was ending. Daniel sighed, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the door. "All right. Let's go." Thor took off like a bullet into the storm, his old legs carrying him with purpose. Daniels followed, mud sucking at his boots, wind cutting through his jacket. They moved fast through the woods until they reached the old barn, abandoned since the fire 5 years back. Thor stopped. His body stiffened. Then Daniels heard it. A soft whimper. Faint. Fragile. Human. He stepped around the barn and froze. There, half buried in mud, was a little girl, tied with rusted chains. Barely breathing. "Oh my God," Daniels gasped, dropping to his knees. She looked no older than 8. Skin pale, lips cracked, hair soaked and matted to her face. Bruises up her arms. Ankles raw from the chain. But when her eyes flickered open, they locked on Thor. Her lips moved. "Thor." Daniels blinked. "What did you say?" The girl's hand shook as she reached for the dog. Thor stepped forward gently, then laid down beside her like he had done this 100 times. Daniels called for backup, voice shaking. "I found a child. Female. Alive. Chained. Behind the Peterson barn." Paramedics rushed in minutes later. They were shocked. No one had reported a missing girl. No alerts. Nothing. One medic whispered, "How long was she here?" Daniels said nothing. Just watched as Thor refused to leave her side. At the hospital, the girl didn't speak to anyone. Not the doctors. Not the nurses. Only Thor. She reached for him the moment they tried to take him out of the room. "No," she cried, voice raw. "Don't take him. He found me." The staff looked at Daniels. He nodded. "Let the dog stay." So Thor stayed. Curled up by her bed, eyes on the door like a soldier. Daniels sat outside, rubbing his temples. "This makes no sense," he muttered. "Who chains a kid in the woods? And how the hell did you know?" When the doctor stepped out, he looked serious. "She's stable, but terrified. She won't give a name. No school record. No one's come looking." Daniels swallowed hard. "We'll find out. Start with missing children reports from nearby towns. Anything unusual. And keep that dog close to her." Back at the house later that week, the girl finally spoke again. "I used to hear him," she whispered. "In my dreams. Thor. He kept barking. He wouldn't stop." Daniels sat beside her. "You knew his name?" She nodded slowly. "He found me." Thor nudged her hand. Daniels watched them, heart heavy. This wasn't coincidence. This was connection. And for the first time in years, Thor looked alive again. Because some barks aren't just noise. Sometimes, they're calls from one broken soul to another. And Thor? He answered. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't speak. She just held on to Thor like he was the only thing keeping her breathing. Doctors came and went, checking her vitals, whispering in worried tones. They said she was malnourished, hadn't eaten properly in weeks. Her arms were covered in bruises, some fresh, some old. Her wrists and ankles had raw skin where the chains had rubbed her for who knows how long. But she didn't react to any of it. Not until someone tried to move Thor. "We need to take the dog for medical evaluation," a nurse told Daniels. "Just to make sure he's okay." Daniels knelt beside the bed. "Rosie, can I call you that for now? We just want to check Thor. He'll be right back." She didn't look at him. But when two men came to gently pull the dog away, her body tensed. She gripped Thor's fur and finally spoke, voice shaky but sharp. "Don't take him. He found me." Everyone in the room froze. Daniels raised a hand. "Stop. Nobody moves him." The nurse leaned in, whispering, "Did she just speak?" Daniels nodded slowly. "Yeah. And we're not risking her shutting down again." From that moment, the name stuck. Rosie. No last name. No known family. No records. But she had Thor. And Thor had her. He never left her side. Not for food. Not for water. He laid by her bed like he was back on duty, eyes open, ears alert, heart locked on the little girl who trusted him more than anyone else. Daniels watched them quietly from the hallway. "She talks to him," one nurse said softly. Daniels turned. "What do you mean?" "She won't speak to us. But at night, I've seen her whispering into his ear. Telling him stories. Humming songs." Daniels stared through the glass window. "What happened to you, kid?" he murmured. Days passed. No one came forward. No missing child reports matched Rosie's description. Daniels drove miles in every direction, knocked on doors, showed photos. Nothing. It was like she never existed. One afternoon, Daniels brought a stuffed bear to her hospital room. He held it out gently. "Thought you might like this." She didn't take it. But she looked at him. First time in days. "You're the man with Thor," she said. He nodded. "Yeah. Name's Daniels. I'm a police officer, but Thor's the real hero." She reached out and touched the bear, barely whispering, "Thank you." Daniels sat down in the chair beside her bed. "You're safe now, Rosie. No one's gonna hurt you again." She looked away. "I heard his bark before he came." Daniels blinked. "You heard him before he got there?" She nodded. "He was in my dreams. Barking. Like he was coming to find me." Daniels didn't know what to say. Sometimes, things happen that no report can explain. That night, Rosie had a nightmare. She thrashed in her bed, crying out, "No, no, don't take me back." Thor jumped up, paws on the bed, licking her hands until she calmed down. Daniels rushed in, but Rosie was already clinging to the dog again, eyes wide, heart racing. He sat beside her, voice gentle. "He's here. You're safe. He's not letting anyone get near you." She didn't speak. But she didn't let go of Thor either. Later, Daniels made a call to a judge he trusted. "She has no one," he said. "Let me take temporary custody. Just until we figure things out." The judge hesitated. "That's a big step, Daniels. She doesn't trust anyone but me and the dog. That should be enough." And it was. Rosie came home to Daniels' quiet little house in the countryside. She didn't talk much, didn't smile either. But she slept through the night for the first time. Thor slept outside her room. Sometimes, Daniels would find her curled up on the floor with the dog, holding his ear like a child holds a blanket. In the quiet of the night, Daniels stood by her door and whispered, "We'll find out where you came from. I promise." Rosie stirred in her sleep. And Thor? He didn't sleep at all. Because deep down he knew. This wasn't over. Rosie was still quiet around most people. But with Thor, it was different. She talked to him like he was her twin soul. Whispered stories into his ear, sometimes so soft Officer Daniels could barely catch a word. But he listened from the hallway anyway. Every night. She never said the man's name. Just called him the Boots. "The Boots locked me in the dark," she whispered one evening. He had keys on his belt. They jingled like metal snakes. Daniels leaned against the wall, fists clenched. "What else, Rosie?" he asked gently. But she didn't answer him. Only Thor. "He said I didn't need school. Said I belonged to the woods. Said no one would look for me." Thor shifted closer to her chest, head resting on her lap. Some nights, Rosie would sit by the window and stare at the trees like they were holding secrets. "The trees whispered," she once said. But nobody listened. Daniels took every word seriously. He opened missing child files from the last 5 years. Ran DNA tests. Called old contacts, social workers, even private investigators. He mapped out every cabin in a 10-mile radius. Nothing. "She's a ghost," one deputy muttered. "It's like she came from nowhere." But Daniels didn't give up. He knew something wasn't right. And then, it happened again. It was late. The sky was calm, No rain, no wind. Rosie had finally fallen asleep. Thor was curled beside her like always. Until he wasn't. Daniels woke up to scratching sounds. He looked out the window and saw Thor bolting toward the woods, tail stiff, head low. "Thor!" Daniels shouted, grabbing his jacket. He followed him, heart pounding. It was the same path as before. Same trees. Same barn. But this time, Thor didn't stop at the barn. He circled behind it. Daniels followed the dog's low growl to a patch of disturbed leaves. The smell hit him first, rotted meat, sweat, and something else, decay. Thor sniffed the ground, then froze. Daniels pointed the flashlight downward. Footprints. Fresh. Large. Deep in the mud. And not alone. There were boot prints next to them. And near the barn wall, a candy wrapper. Daniels picked it up slowly. It was the same kind Rosie had been given at the hospital, one she said she hadn't tasted in years. He called it in. Backup arrived. But no one was found. No traps. No equipment. Just a silent, empty forest. Except for one thing. A single frayed piece of rope, half buried in dirt. Same kind used on Rosie's wrists. Daniels walked back to the house in silence. Rosie was awake, sitting in the hallway floor, hugging her knees. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Daniels asked softly. She nodded. He was watching. "I felt him in the trees." Thor walked over and pressed his head into her shoulder. Daniels knelt beside them. "He's not going to take you again. Not on my watch. And definitely not while Thor's breathing." Rosie looked up at him with wide, scared eyes. "He doesn't care." He said the woods belonged to him. Daniels didn't answer. Because deep down, he feared she might be right. The next day, Daniels drove her to a safer place, a friend's farmhouse, far from the woods. But as they packed, Rosie turned to Thor and whispered, "You'll find him again, won't you?" Thor nudged her hand, tail still and eyes sharp. Back in the patrol truck, Daniels watched the tree lean fade in the mirror. Then his phone buzzed. A call from dispatch. "Sir, we've got something. A cabin deep west. Not on official maps. Fire tower found it by drone." Daniels straightened. "Anyone there?" "Looks abandoned. But there's movement in the woods nearby. Want us to wait?" He looked back at Rosie, sleeping with her hand still gripping Thor's collar. "No," Daniels said. "Don't wait. I'm coming." Because if Thor had taught him anything, the past doesn't sleep, and evil doesn't always stay gone. Sometimes, it follows. Daniels drove fast. The trees grew denser as he followed the unmarked road. His GPS stopped working 5 miles back, but Thor didn't need it. The dog sat upright in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on the woods like he was tracking ghosts. "You sure, buddy?" Daniels asked. Thor let out a low growl in response. It was enough. They reached the clearing by sunset. Hidden by overgrowth and time, the cabin looked like it had crawled out of the earth, rotting wood, shattered windows, door hanging on rusted hinges. Daniels stepped out with his flashlight. "Stay close." Thor didn't need to be told. He moved ahead, nose to the ground, his body tense. The air was thick. Silent. Not even birds dared to sing. Inside the cabin, the stench hit first, mold, sweat, and something fouler. The place looked like it hadn't seen daylight in years. A single chair sat in the corner. A pile of blankets in another. Rusted chains bolted into the floor. Daniels froze when he saw them. Then he saw the wall. Drawings. Childlike. Crude. Stick figures. Trees. A dog. A girl behind bars. A man with boots. Daniels felt his throat tighten. "It's real," he whispered. "All of it." Thor sniffed around, then stopped at a half-buried box under a plank. Inside were clothes. Small ones. Torn. Dirty. He picked up a worn pink hoodie and recognized it instantly. Rosie's. Daniels took photos. Every detail. Every nightmare Rosie had described now sat in front of him in mold and memory. But the man? Gone. No food, no bags, no signs of life. Just shadows. He called it in. Found the place. Matches everything she said. But he's not here. Back at home, Rosie was waiting. She sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, eyes locked on the door. The moment Daniel stepped in, she stood. You found it. He nodded slowly. Yes. Rosie gripped the blanket tighter. Was he there? No, Daniels replied. But we'll find him. She looked down. He came back. Daniels blinked. What? She trembled. While you were gone. I heard his whistle. Outside my window. Thor growled from across the room. The same deep, low growl he gave when danger was close. Daniels knelt beside Rosie. You're safe now. He didn't get in. But he's watching, she whispered. He always watches first. That night, Daniels checked every lock, every window. He sat with his gun beside him, watching the tree line. Thor refused to sleep. He paced. Growled. Sat by the door like a statue made of instinct. At 2 a.m., Rosie screamed. Daniels ran to her room. She was sitting upright, drenched in sweat. He was in the woods again, she gasped. I saw his boots. Daniels looked out the window. Nothing. But Thor was already barking, loud, sharp, furious. He bolted out the back door and vanished into the dark. Daniels followed with a flashlight, heart racing. Thor. No response. 5 minutes later, Thor came back. Empty-mouthed. Mud on his paws. His teeth bared. Daniels knelt. What did you see? Thor just stared toward the woods, hackles still raised. Daniels stood and turned to Rosie. Pack a bag. We're going. She looked up. Where? To a safer place, he said. You're not staying here another night. They left at sunrise. Daniels took Rosie and Thor to his uncle's old lake cabin. Remote, secured, peaceful. Just until I figure out the next move, he told her. She nodded, but her hands shook as she unpacked. That night, Thor curled at her feet. Daniel sat on the porch, watching the trees. He couldn't shake the feeling. Whoever that man was, he wasn't done. And Thor? He was waiting for something. Or someone. And deep in those woods, something was waiting back. The lake cabin was meant to be safe. Secluded, locked up tight, guarded by a retired officer and a battle-worn K9. But some monsters don't care about locks, or distance. 3 nights passed in silence. Then came the storm. Rain hammered the roof, wind howled through the trees, and the power snapped off without warning. Daniels checked the fuse box. Nothing. Weird, he muttered. Lines shouldn't be down this close to town. Inside, Rosie sat stiff on the couch, Thor pressed to her side. His ears twitched. Daniels returned with candles, his gut tight with unease. We'll ride it out. But then, Thor growled. Not the warning kind. The deep, primal kind he hadn't used since the cabin. What is it, boy? Thor ran to the door and barked. Once. Loud. Final. Then Daniels noticed it. The back door's lock. It was scratched. Not broken, not kicked in. Picked. Daniels drew his weapon, heart racing. Rosie, stay with Thor. Don't move. Rosie didn't blink. She whispered, he's here. Daniels spun. What? Her face had gone pale. I heard it again. Then came the sound. A whistle. Low. Slow. Just like she had described. Thor erupted. Barking, snarling, clawing at the door. Daniels rushed out, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. Rain blinded him, but Thor was already gone, into the woods. And then, a scream. Daniels ran, flashlight beam jerking with every step. He heard growling. Struggling. Then he saw them. Thor was on top of a man, tall, soaked, face half covered in a torn hood. The man thrashed, knife in hand, but Thor had sunk his teeth deep into his arm. Blood mixed with rain. Daniels shouted, drop the knife. The man didn't move. Thor twisted, yanking the man off balance. The knife clattered into the mud. Daniels tackled him from behind, cuffed him fast, breath ragged. The man wheezed, she's mine. Daniels punched the ground beside his head. Not anymore. Thor stood there, chest heaving, eyes still burning. Backup arrived minutes later. The man didn't resist. He just kept whispering. She doesn't belong with you. I raised her. She's mine. Daniels turned away in disgust. Rosie stood on the porch, soaked to the bone. She hadn't cried, hadn't screamed. She just looked at Thor. He limped toward her, blood on his muzzle. She knelt, hugged his neck and whispered, you came back again. Thor licked her cheek and sat down. Daniels knelt beside her. It's over. Rosie shook her head. Not yet. What do you mean? She pointed at the man being dragged into the squad car. He said he's not the only one. He said, others watched. Daniels stiffened. You sure? She nodded. He used to say that. When I tried to scream, he'd say, no one's coming. They're all the same. Daniels stood, jaw tight. The officers took the man into custody. They found matches to other open cases, chains, cabins, lost girls. But Rosie's warning echoed in Daniels' ears. What if there were more? Back inside, Thor laid down, exhausted. Daniels placed a blanket over him. You saved her. Again. Rosie sat beside them and whispered, he remembered. Every time. Daniels smiled softly. He never forgot. The rain slowed. The trees stopped swaying. But in that silence, something still hung in the air. Something unfinished. Daniels picked up his phone, staring at the cabin's old floorboards. Tomorrow, there would be more questions. More digging. But tonight, they were alive. And Thor? He was more than alive. He was ready. Thor stayed by Rosie's side until the sun rose. The man who haunted her was finally gone, arrested, cuffed, and tied to crime stretching back over a decade. DNA from the cabin, from the rope, from the blood on the night Thor fought him. It all sealed the truth. He wasn't just Rosie's captor. He was a monster that had slipped through cracks for years. But not anymore. Daniel stood outside the courthouse the day of the sentencing. He watched as the man, hollow-eyed and silent now, was driven away for life. Good riddance, he muttered. Rosie didn't need to see it. She didn't have to. Because her healing had already begun. Back at the house, she was different. Still quiet, still gentle, but stronger somehow. She didn't flinch at the wind anymore. She didn't check the locks twice before bed. And she smiled. Not all the time, but when she did, it lit up everything. Daniels started paperwork the next week. Adoption wasn't part of his plan before, but Rosie was never just a case. She was family now. She watched him sign the papers in the courthouse hallway, hand shaking just a little. Does this mean I can call you Dad? She asked. He blinked, smiled slowly, and nodded. Only if I get to keep calling you Rosie. She laughed, a sound that had been missing for too long. And Thor? He aged fast after that final fight. His limp grew worse. His naps got longer. But every morning, he waited at the door, tail wagging, until Rosie came down the stairs with her backpack. Ready, buddy? She'd ask. And without fail, he'd walk her to the school bus. Other kids watched from their windows as the old dog guarded her like a knight, then limped slowly back home with Daniels. At school, Rosie made a friend named Lily. Then another named Mateo. Bit by bit, she opened up. Until one day, she signed up for show and tell. Daniels drove her in early that morning. Thor sat in the back seat, tongue hanging out. You sure about this? Daniels asked as she held his leash tightly. Rosie nodded. He deserves it. In the classroom, the kids stared as Thor walked in. Some giggled, others gasped. But Rosie stood tall at the front of the room. This is Thor, she said. He used to be a rescue dog. Then he found me. When no one else could. He saved me, and he never gave up. The room went still. Then one kid clapped. Then another. Soon the whole class was cheering. But Thor didn't react. He just wagged his tail once and laid down at Rosie's feet. Like always. That night, Rosie curled up on the couch beside him, resting her head on his chest. Do you think he knows? She asked. Daniels looked over. Knows what? That I'm okay now. Daniels nodded. He's always known. Rosie closed her eyes, fingers tangled in Thor's fur. Time moved on. Seasons changed. But every evening, Daniels would see Rosie walking home from the bus stop, sometimes laughing with a friend, sometimes humming a tune, and always stopping at Thor's resting spot in the yard. He'd passed quietly one spring morning, curled in his bed, the sun warming his face. Rosie had held him until the end. They buried him beneath the big tree out back, where the wind whispered gently and the grass grew soft. Daniels carved a stone with one simple line. He found her when no one else could. And in the quiet, Rosie placed her hand on the marker and whispered, Good boy, Thor. You can rest now. Because heroes don't need medals. Sometimes, they just need to be remembered. If Thor's story touched your heart, share this video with someone who believes in second chances, for both people and animals. Tell us in the comments. What would you have done if Thor came barking at your door that stormy night? And don't forget to hug your pets a little tighter tonight. Because sometimes, the quietest heroes walk on four legs, and they never stop fighting for us.